Hello, everyone. I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Webinars. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, AP Automation. The time is now. I would like to thank our webinar partner today, Mineral Tree, whose strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible. The expectations of accounts payable are changing from being a cost center to being a core strategic function. Is your AP team up for the challenge? How are companies of all sizes impacting the bottom line by leveraging AP best practices? Can your company afford to get left behind? AP should be a strategic priority at your company. Today, you will discover how to make this happen by identifying specific tactics to lower AP processing costs, impacting productivity within and beyond AP, identifying and mitigating fraud exposures, and improving supplier relationships and taking more control of how and when you pay suppliers. Before I delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about Treasury webinars, cover a few housekeeping items, and then review our learning objectives for the webinar as they represent our value proposition to you for investing your valuable time with us today. Now on to the exciting housekeeping items. For those of you interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions and remain on the line for the duration of our webinar. If you have any questions regarding CTP credit, please send an email to ernie@treasurywebinars.com. I have also input my email address in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. Speaking of your GoToWebinar control panel, I would love to hear from you today. You can ask your questions at any time in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll do my best to get to your questions at the Q&A session, time permitting, at the tail end of our webinar. Fear not, if I do not get to your question, I will follow up with you directly after the webinar to address your question. Finally, we appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey at the end of the webinar, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. Now, our learning objectives. After the webinar today, I'd like you to be able to understand why AP deserves to be a strategic priority at your company, be able to identify opportunities to leverage AP automation to mitigate invoice processing costs at your company, identify opportunities to improve supplier relationships and productivity by leveraging AP automation, identify opportunities to take more control of how and when you pay suppliers, and discover 10 specific ways the bottom line is being impacted at companies that have invested in AP automation. So how are we going to accomplish our objectives today? Well, we're going to take a little look at the evolution of accounts payable and really the current state of accounts payable, the technology available, the knowledge available. All companies should be making accounts payable a strategic priority, and the time to do so is now. We'll take a look at what AP automation done right looks like, and then we'll start to get into the value proposition of AP done right. We'll talk about supplier relationships, invoice processing, and taking control of payments, and really start to set the stool for that value proposition to your company and investing in AP done right. And what you'll see is that business case is really coming together. And part of that business case is communicating the sense of urgency of what's going on in accounts payable. So one thing that you'll want to do is you'll want to make an assessment of where you're at, right, in terms of your accounts payable efficiency. And then what you can do is frame your business case into what's the cost if we continue to do things that are causing us to incur unnecessary processing costs, not allowing us to capture discounts, and really take more control of how and when we make payments. There are definitely some outstanding opportunities all across the P2P cycle. And then we'll talk about 10 ways AP automation done right impacts the bottom line. This is probably, we get there, this is my favorite slide. So this really lays out the business case, and this is why accounts payable matters. And this is a slide, if you're not the CFO, this is a slide I would take right to the CFO and say, this is the reason that we need to look at AP automation and what AP done right can do for our company. And then we'll go a little bit from theory to practice, and we'll share some AP automation case studies, success studies. So we'll talk about the potential of AP automation in theory, and then we'll share a few case studies from our webinar partner, Mineral Tree, and then we'll wrap things up with some closing thoughts, and then time permitting, what we'll do is we'll get into our Q&A session. So before we really delve into the content, I just want to level set a little bit, launch our first polling question, get a sense from you in the audience what your primary challenge within your accounts payable is today you have not enough resources, you just have a lot of volume, your workflows are inconsistent, your reporting is limited, no audit trail makes vendor inquiries difficult, maybe you don't know. And if I don't have your challenge listed there, I'll just go ahead and do me a favor and pick A, B, C, or D, and which one of these is the most challenging at your company today. I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. Note, those of you who are interested in receiving CTP credits, you will have to answer all of our polling questions here today. So in order to be mindful of our time together today, I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another few seconds or so. Then we're going to go ahead and take a look at the results here, and I'll offer any color commentary that I have in terms of what I've been seeing in the AP research world over the past 3 to 4 years. I've become really involved. It's really been a game-changing evolution here for the role of accounts payable and the opportunity to offer value. So it's really been an exciting time. I've experience in accounts payable. I have a lot of experience in Treasury, and I'm very excited to see that accounts payable is starting to get its due. So let's go ahead and close the polling question, get a quick look at the results. So top 30%, we have not enough resources to manage the volume that we have, and then workflows are inconsistent and reporting is limited. And so that's a little about what I expected. Sometimes I'd like to see a little more. I expect to see a little more. Sorry, in the reporting side of things, because the reporting side is really what allows us to unlock that strategic value. The good news is that at the root cause of those top 3 items are manual processes and ineffective workflows and approvals, and we'll see that technology, cost-effective technology, allows us to really address those pain points and allow us to deliver that value. So not enough resources, that creates inefficiencies. That makes your invoice processing costs goes up, makes your team unproductive. Workflows are inconsistent. That causes bottlenecks. Costs go up. You can't even take advantage of discounts that might be offered. Reporting is limited. Really does not allow you. Can't manage what you can't see, right? Doesn't allow you to identify opportunities to make improvements in the process where opportunities arise for changes in process, automating workflows. And then 19% of you, I don't know, maybe you're not the accounts payable person or you don't have direct control over accounts payable. Guess what? You all have homework. So especially if you're in Treasury and finance and you don't know, I think it'd be a great idea for you to have a quick conversation with your accounts payable colleagues, because what we're seeing in the market is Treasury and finance. Treasury in particular is taking more ownership back of accounts payable and accounts receivable. So let's endeavor to own that cash conversion cycle. So part of really helping our AP team do that is really understand what that challenge is for them. And then hopefully after the webinar, you'll be able to share some information with them on how other companies are addressing these challenges and be able to bring specific tactics to improve the value that AP offers at your company. So thank you very much, everyone, for your consideration answering the questions. I just love this graphic because it really illustrates what I've seen. So when I was back in as a treasury manager, AP was really more of a back office function. I didn't really see that transition to a point of collaboration. Maybe into 2000, even the middle of 2000, maybe late in 2000, maybe up until 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And then what I've really seen is I just love this word. AP can absolutely be a true intelligence hub. And for me, what I see, the main value there is in the supplier relationship. So the better relationships that we have with suppliers, we can control how and when we make payments. So there's tremendous value there. So we can start to go away from payment types that are costly, and we can also collaborate with our suppliers in terms of discounts. So we may have opportunities for dynamic discounting. So we have opportunities to optimize our working capital and also bring predictability into our working capital. So that makes my treasury folks happy and the CFO happy. So again, it's a tremendously exciting time. And I'll show some research results. And I really love these next few slides because it really shows the evolution of accounts payable. So those of you who haven't been paying a lot of attention to what's going on in accounts payable, this really shows you the momentum that's going on, and just shows, if you haven't been paying attention to it and it's still a back office function, it's really going to show you how you are getting behind. And if you're not really on top of your game in terms of accounts payable, this can be a competitive disadvantage to your customers. So just imagine if your competitors have better relationships with their suppliers. Guess what? Guess what? That's going to hurt your company. So those are things to think about. So I love this. I love to see. This is from the Ardent Partners, the State of E-Payables. If you're interested in getting a copy of the presentation, there's a lot of research hyperlinks here. But I'm pleasantly surprised to see 42% exceptionally valuable, and we've got 76% is very valuable, exceptionally valuable. For any of you that haven't been paying much attention to accounts payable, if I would have, this is probably really surprising to you. So for me, if I'd have seen this result a few years ago, I would just be shocked, and I'm glad to see it. So when I worked in Treasury, I would have probably fallen down here. It's not very valuable. And then I love to see this as exceptionally valuable. So I think what we're going to start to see here is we're going to start to see these numbers pivot, right? So I think as companies pay more attention, get that visibility, look at optimizing that cash conversion cycle, they're going to see that the investment in accounts payable in terms of resources is really not where it should be, and we'll start to see exceptionally valuable. We'll see this pivot here, and we'll start to see that accounts payable is not of little value. So just some more data on really supports, right, this notion that AP is becoming more valuable. Well, why, right? AP is managing more things that are strategic, impact cost, impact the bottom line. I like to get the CFO's attention. When you start to look at improving accounts payable costs, especially invoice processing costs, you start to look at tens of thousands of dollars a month, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, millions of dollars a year. Now go to your CFO and tell them, I'm going to take $1 million per year off the bottom line. Oh, really? That's impressive. So the thing that I find kind of interesting is that if you really look at it, accounts payable is really among, if not the most complicated business process that companies of all sizes have, yet we haven't really been paying enough attention to accounts payable in terms of automation and efficiency. So areas managed, so we're doing more with fraud prevention, and we'll talk about that later. And so in terms of fraud prevention, that's another webinar, right? I look at that in terms of people, process, and technology. The good news is for fraud prevention, if you can optimize your payment types, certain types of payments are more risky than others. So as we transition away from checks, as we use automation, as we remove manual processes, as we remove people and the number of systems that we have, that really helps us with that. Taking more ownership of that P2P technology, I think that's really driven by the fact that there are several cloud-based solutions out there, so we don't necessarily need IT to lead our project, lead the implementation. Now, they need to be aware of what we're doing, right? We want to make sure that we're following our policies and that they're aware, and that all of our business systems communicate with each other, but we're allowed to take the lead there, right, in finance and accounts payable. Improving payment operations, so platforms. So again, this goes with technology, supply chain finance, working capital. So how do we support that? We need to get visibility into our discounts. So one of the things that some companies don't have visibility in is how well are you doing at taking advantage of those discounts? It almost always makes sense to take a discount. And then, of course, as you can more efficiently process the number of days it takes to process an invoice, then you can start to do some dynamic discounting as well. Drive visibility to stakeholders. Again, what we can do when we get the right solution, we can do some reporting. We can start to see some payment patterns, some trend patterns that can help us negotiate with our suppliers. That visibility gives us the ability to look at some spend management. Again, this is my big thing. Those of you that heard me speak before, supplier relationship management, just critical. We're starting to see this now. So before the past few years, all we heard about was CRM, client relationship management, and now it's awesome to see accounts payable. And hey, what's the value in paying attention to our supplier relationships, making every interaction positive, working with our suppliers, and then when we work with our suppliers in electronifying the process, guess what? Their accounts receivable processing costs go down. So there's a lot of opportunities for win-win, and to really lead part of a value proposition with our suppliers. It's a win-win situation. Then we talked about some working capital management as well. And this is what we see, and I'm glad to see this. So in terms of expectations, so maybe you're in accounts payable and you haven't really been paying a lot of attention into what's going on, and it's not that automation is necessarily going to drive down headcount. It's not going to eliminate the accounts payable profession. What it's going to do is it's going to cause accounts payable professionals to redefine what their value proposition is. So how do we in accounts payable redefine our value proposition? You're going to have more functional collaboration with finance and treasury. You're going to be more involved in the technology. You're going to lead the automation, not be afraid of it. You're going to want to get part of your day back. You're going to want to spend more time analyzing payments trends, figuring out how to work with our suppliers to optimize how and when we make payments. Again, along with process digitally transform payments, you want to be an intelligence hub. So what does that mean, right? We are providing information that helps our procurement folks make better decision, helps us optimize our working capital. And then this down here, which is what we'll see. I'm a little bit out of the mainstream here. I just don't think we're quite ready for the cryptocurrency here. But again, this kind of shows what the evolution is. So there's a tremendous amount of momentum here. There's tremendous value. So the time to really look at accounts payable and done right is really now. Now is a great time. There are a lot of different vendors out there, a lot of different options, and a lot of attention to customer service. So it's just a great time. It's an exciting time. So I'll show you this slide again. This is my favorite slide. So this is why you need to look at AP automation right now. If I had to give you one slide and say the webinar is over, this would be it, right? Mitigates invoice processing costs. And if you don't know how much it costs your company to process an invoice, that's something I strongly encourage you to do. So when you start to look at that invoice processing cost, you'll start to see areas of opportunities. There are a lot of benchmarks out there in terms of what other companies are paying, but I think what you'll find is you'll find areas of opportunities, and you might just be shocked. And there's many resources available that are free that can help you build that cost up. But I think that's a key benchmark that you have. So it mitigates the payment of duplicate invoices. A lot of times automation is where we do that. So that I've seen some numbers where it can be as high as 3 to 5% that those invoices get in the system twice. Now, do they always get paid? Probably not, but that really slows down our process as well. Mitigates time spent resolving supplier issues and disputes. This is where I was initially shocked when I started really digging into accounts payable research, is the amount of hours that are spent by AP staff by these disputes. And when you leverage technology in the right way, you can mitigate some of the root causes. One is I see there's an asymmetry of information that goes on. So you're going to be able to see that same information at the same time. The ability to communicate effectively back and forth. So being able to look at things at the same time, and also being able to see the history of communications with our suppliers. So if we keep having a dispute month over month, let's start to see that trend. Let's start to be proactive in our supplier relationship issues that we have. And also, there are supplier portals out there that many of the AP automation solution providers offer, which really allows the suppliers to take more control over things such as their bank account information. So that takes the onus off of us. And also just issues that you have in terms of your master records and your relationships with your parent-children relationships, that can be hairy. I mentioned before, it allows discounts to be captured. Almost always makes sense to do that. Again, the more efficient we are in the time it takes us to process these invoices, it opens up opportunities for early payment programs. We'll have a webinar on that here in March. It impacts the productivity of employees processing invoices. So the part of it I already mentioned, not being on the phone, right, with issues and disputes, not doing manual tasks, possibly not doing manual reviews of everything, optimizing that workflow, being able to have things approved on the road. It can mitigate payments processing costs. So as we start to look at how are we making payments, some companies get into the habit of, well, we need to pay checks. We've always done it. It's less costly, less risky, and that's all and that's all our suppliers will take. Well, I'm here to tell you that those days are gone. So it's always been that checks are 10 times as costly as an ACH. Suppliers are actually requesting electronic payments, and so some of those myths are absolutely gone. And then, as I mentioned, as you look at different types of risk, the incidence of fraud attempts is highest with checks. In certain cases, if it makes sense for you and your suppliers, if you can convert them to commercial card payments, that can offer your company rebates, and some of the automation solution providers help you convert those folks. Of course, you want to own that messaging. We mentioned improves working capital management, and it affects the productivity of employees also that are involved in approving and pushing the button in Treasury and making those payments go out. So right there it is. That's why AP matters and why you need to look at accounts payable. Here, we need to get our suppliers in the system. Guess what? We have to make sure our suppliers, we're allowed to do business with them. Are there restrictions? Are there regulations? That has to get approved, verified as legal entities. You got to go to approvals. You've got to run things through. So it just shows like all the relationships, and this cycle goes on and on. So at each stage that there's not automation, there's introduces risk. Bank account information. What about the communication of that bank account information? So it's just kind of interesting to see, again, people, process, technology, of how complicated that process is. So just to take a look at some of the challenges, and I hope these ring true to you. We talked about this a little earlier. Just some more research behind that. High percentage of exceptions. Again, what does that do? Increase our cost, gets things out of our, if we have that, kicks things out of our normal workflow, so that increase our costs in terms of dollar amount, but also increases in terms of the amount of discounts that we're able to take. On that side, also impacts our productivity. Talked about these. Payment approvals take too long. Too much paper. We always want to see if we can remove paper from the process. High invoice processing costs and lack of visibility into payments data. So I would expect that these to be a little bit higher. So high invoice processing costs. I think this is a little bit around you don't know what you don't know, right? So I think that if you actually had that estimate, you'd be like, whoa, that's a huge challenge. And then that lack of visibility into invoice and payments data. I think in some sense, what we see is that people don't really realize the value that we can gain from having that visibility into the invoice and payment data. And that visibility is really at the foundation of driving AP done right. So let's just take a quick look again, and let's take a look at what AP automation looks like. So I think the next few slides are really important. If you're in the discovery phase, if you're looking, or even if you're you got your short list, or maybe if you're even implementing, and even if you have your system in place, let's go ahead and take a look back and see how we're doing these things. Again, apologize if this is a review for some of you, but I think it's really important and really lays out the processes in a very effective manner. So in the capture side, right? What does that success look like? You want to be able to automate that capture, right? You want to be able to, if you need to scan those invoices in bulk, convert paper invoices to searchable PDF documents, upload documents from your email, automatically extract invoice header and GL code with no manual invoice entry. So we want to look at what do we have in terms of that OCR data. So how can we automatically do that? Maybe we're even getting towards a little bit of artificial intelligence there. So how do we remove the manual process? And then, of course, we want to link the invoice documents with the invoice data. So a big bottleneck that we often see is in the matching on the PO side. So again, capturing that information and being able to have that electronically and facilitate that automated matching process can be really important. The approval process, so once that gets in, how do we make sure that that approval is as seamless as possible without manual intervention and takes place in a timely manner? You need to be able to route vendor invoices to the approvers based on rules. You can put those rules in there. Isn't that nice for our auditors? We have those rules, separation of duty. We have that audit trail. And then the good news is you can customize your workflows, existing process, or make new ones. So a lot of the concerns that folks have is they said we have these really complicated, customized workflows. Our industry is complicated. Well, The good news is that the AP automation solution vendors, they've been at this for more than the last few years, and they work across industries. And they work really closely with their customers. So it's often hard to find something that you can't do. And it really, when you start to look at these solutions and get a demo, you can tell that the people developing this really get it. And you have people that have run accounts payable in very complex companies, and they understand what's coming, and they're ready for those changes in business dynamics. So you want to make it configurable, and then of course we talked about controls and tracking. So what we have capture, approve. Now let's look at authorize. So this is important. On the go, let's keep things going. You want to have a system that supports single and multiple payment authorizers. Maybe there's dual authorizations. You want secure segregation of duty. And then payment limit alerts. If someone's coming over a payment limit, you can hard stop it, or you can just send an automatic alert to someone knowing that this might be an exception that we made a payment for. And then I talked about, and then of course, we can have two-factor payment verification to help us mitigate unauthorized or fraudulent payments. And then pay, right, the payment side, and this is where we'll talk a little bit more. So just send the payments directly and securely right from the system. It gives you online account fraud protections. They're sent directly from your own account. In the best case scenario, recorded automatically, two-way real-time synchronization with your accounting system. Wouldn't we like to make our accounting friends happy, right? And mitigate those journal entries. And then this is key. Remittance details transmitted automatically so vendors know when, why, and how they've been paid. So when I was in Treasury, I used to think, we need to send checks because I need that. We need to have some checks, right? Because when I get the payment, I want to make sure that I can do that cash application. So when we're having these conversations with checks, why do we need checks? I mean, we'd like to send you a wire payment. Oh, okay, wire payment. Well, I can't get the details. Oh, yes, you absolutely can. And then it also helps lower their AR processing costs. If you tell them you might be able to mitigate your lockbox, that is a huge value add. So let's see if I can operate the mechanics of our next polling questions correctly. So I've gone ahead and asked you to characterize the overall state of your company's supplier relationships with suppliers. So we'll start to talk about the value in investing in better supplier relationships. So do you have not good, poor communication, constant issues? Oh, not too good, but getting better. Acceptable. How about good? We communicate and collaborate effectively, or I don't know. Again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. A reminder, those of you who might be interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar will need to have you answer all of our polling questions. Also want to take a moment to remind you that I can still take your questions at any time in the questions area of our GoToWebinar control panel. So I'm going to give you a few more seconds and then we'll take a quick look at our polling question results. So let's go ahead and close and let's go ahead and take a look. I am glad to see that we have 13% of you in the not the best but getting better or not good communication constant. I promise you, anyone that said not good, I'm not going to tell on you. So our information at the respondent level is going to be confidential to us. 36% is acceptable. I'm pleasantly surprised to see 39% of you say good. If you're in that good category, you might also want to ask yourself, are there any information asymmetries between my AP staff and my suppliers? Do we have communication? Can I easily see all of the activity and communications with our suppliers? So I think that's something to consider. Acceptable. You can do better, right? So we've got 61% of you where I think this is really a case where it's going to be very low-hanging fruit. And even those of you in the good category, I think when we start to see the value in improving those supplier relationships, it'll make you take a little look and say, what can we do even better to really improve the value that we offer our suppliers? And again, take more control of how and when we make payments. So thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time. And so let's go ahead and transition back. And then I just want to make a point. of the supplier relationship, that relationship starts when you're onboarding. So let's take a look at this. Again, I want to take a look at this. Every interaction matters. And for me, I was in manufacturing. So anytime we needed something from our suppliers, especially manufacturing, we couldn't really afford to have a bad relationship, because anything that would uh, incent them, right, not to help us out. Maybe we had something's wrong with our order. We had another supplier who's gone out of business or things like that. We want to make sure that we have that good relationship with our suppliers because of that, but also because we want to take control of how and when we pay, which offers our company value. So just some things which you might or might not be aware of. Again, if you can potentially add illegal suppliers, well, you talk about a big fine, and that's even more important in today's world. You can send a this can be bad on your process. You can have delays in receiving tax forms. We can have supplier data quality issues, duplicate supplier records, and incorrect payment instructions. A lot of these can be mitigated by using supplier portals. And then again, I said, and then the amount of time that you spend, right, having that master records in order. So there's whole webinars on how to make sure your master records are right. And then on incorrect payment instructions, when you use that in the supplier portal, that takes some of the risk off your side of it. So you don't have employees who are responsible for keying in the wrong information. Payments don't get there, or there's an opportunity for fraud when someone on your side has that. Not that there's not an opportunity for fraud on your supplier side, but then the risk shifts to your supplier in order to make sure that that happens. But the good news is we still have that account trail if any changes were made. So just, I think sometimes that gets missed. So let's start to look end to end, and that means right from onboarding. Every experience we want to be positive. And then I mentioned some of these relationship pain points. I have these little photos. Some folks are more reactive to the photos than just the words. We talked about this. You can have a lack of visibility. We can have these collaboration barriers. There's inefficient communication, which leads to inefficient dispute resolution. And then what ends up happening is that we are reactive instead of proactive. So wouldn't it be nice to be proactive? Let's say you've had an issue with a supplier. You know that there's going to be an invoice come to you. You can reach out to them and say, hey, we've had this issue a couple times. Is there anything that I can do, right? Or is there any way that we can make this easier for you? We can get on the same page. So how do we do that? Just being proactive is a tremendously positive step in their relationship management. And then just to show, again, some more data contributing to poor supplier relationships. Again, we talked about these, just another way to slice and dice, but just to look at it by revenue size. The issues in general are pretty consistent across the company size. So AP can definitely become more complex as your company gets bigger and you go into different markets and maybe have different industries, but there are an awful lot of pain points that are exactly the same regardless of the size of your operation. So what are the benefits, right, to better supplier relationships? Again, why is AP automation important now? What are the benefits to that supplier relationship that we have an investment in making them better? Facilitates accurate supplier mastered records and all related banking information, mitigates that risk, facilitates opportunities to capture existing discounts. Again, if you don't track this as an AP metric, I strongly encourage you to do so. So let's be making educated decisions. And then again, the less time it takes us, we can facilitate opportunities to negotiate discounts with dynamic discounting. So I just got an email from one of my partners where they had an invoice due to me, and they automatically sent me an offer and said, we'll pay you by this date if you want the money now. So there's tremendous opportunities there because they were effective in processing that invoice. And then I talked about this earlier, mitigates time spent on the phone with suppliers resolving real or perceived issues. And wouldn't you like to have phone calls with your suppliers that aren't combative, right? That would be the cat's meow. So let's go ahead and real quick, just answer our next polling question just to get a sense of what your companies are looking at in terms of your amount of invoices you process each month. Again, you can have a lower number of invoices, but they can be tremendously more complicated. I've seen invoice processing costs for invoices for like the airline industry. Those can be hundreds of dollars an invoice. So it definitely has an impact on the number of invoices, but it also depends on the complexity of invoice. And the good news is that the value proposition for investing in automation is a lot of the points are not dependent on the number of invoices that you process. There can be big dollar amounts, the productivity impacts, the way that you can set your company up for in order to be supportive when your company is growing and changing business conditions. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another few seconds, and then we'll go ahead and take a quick peek. And then we'll just, put some numbers behind what that processing cost mitigation looks like from that investment in technology. Let's go ahead and take a quick look here. So the majority of you are in the more than 500 category. So when we start to see what that number is, right, multiplied. So I'll just, for the sake of argument, let's say you save $10 or $15 a month. How about $20 a month, right? What does that give us? 500, 2,000 times $20 times 12. That's a big number on the bottom line. And then those of you that have less invoices, there might be an even bigger difference between how much it costs you today and then where you can get to if you leverage automation with process and technology. So thank you very much, everyone, for answering that polling question. So let's go back and let's take a look and put some numbers behind here. Let's do some eye openers here. Maybe help our CFOs. And what you'll see in the research, you'll see different numbers here, right, between what we call best in class, fully automated versus all others. So, but what you'll always see is there's a big gap here. And again, where you stand depends on where you sit. So you might want to say, okay, where am I at? And then best in class, what does that mean for me? Start to look at where your costs are coming from, right? In your invoice and say, if I did this, how about I lower this by 10%, 20%, 30%? And then you can do your own comparison here just to show the value proposition is a good reason to look at the research. But look at the time to process that. A lot of discounts that I've seen, and I know things are changing, but what if you have 210 net 30, right? You got to be able to process those in under 10 days. What's our invoice exception rate? I would expect this to be a little higher, right? So I think the solutions are making progress. So if we see this in 2019, I got to believe that number is going to go lower. What is it that helps us mitigate our costs and our time? Right, straight through processing. We want everyone doing things electronically. Electronically benefits both parties on many levels. And then we want to link those invoices to POs, and that is an art in and of itself. And that's a whole nother webinar as well. So much to dig into, so much opportunity. So just to give you some good quantitative data here, when you're having these conversations with your CFO, or maybe you're the treasurer or you want to have the conversation with your AP manager. So let's talk about payments a little bit. What are the payments pain points when we don't have that control or that visibility? We talked about discounts lost. You can't take what you can't see. We talked about ineffective, also can lead to ineffective working capital management. You don't know when those payments are going to be made. Our cash forecast is going to be way off, so it can cause our treasury folks to borrow money when they don't need to. You want to make a treasury guy cranky? Make him borrow money when he doesn't need to. And then we talked about we can also have costly payments methods if we're just accepting whatever way that our suppliers want to be paid. Hey, let's just write checks. We've always done it. Tremendously cost. And maybe we're leaving money on the table. Maybe we can convert these folks to a commercial credit card and we can get some rebates. And then we can also have cumbersome controls. We need to have controls, of course. It's clear audit trail, separation of duties, but we need to be able to have things where folks are able to do things online, on the road, and drive efficiencies when possible. And it could be the case that we can remove folks from the system. Maybe that's a centralization of our payments. So just real quick before we start to talk about optimizing payment types. So I'm starting to suggest more often, and I should have always done this, that folks, you should track as a metrics the payment types that you make. So whether it's just electronics payments versus checks, I would look at it usually in really three categories. 4 if you need a Fed wire, checks, ACH, Fed wire, commercial cards. There's so many commercial cards. Fed wire, that's for that one-time huge payment. For example, a couple of times when my company had acquisitions, I was sending tens of millions of dollars, and I wanted to make sure I could track the money. But that's the reason. ACH is low cost, a high volume, and then checks. So before we get into that discussion on what the cost looks like, let's go ahead and launch our next polling question. Just curious, the payments characteristics of our audience here, just asking you to share with us your current mix of payments by supplier type. So is that majority, or are you still doing by checks, majority by electronic payments, anything ACH, wire, card payments, or do you have about an equal amount between checks and electronic payments? And then you may not know. So again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. Again, I want to remind you that I can take your questions in the questions area of our GoToWebinar control panel. In order to be mindful of our time, I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another few seconds. Then we'll take a quick peek at the results here, and then we'll get back to our content and we'll talk about payment costs by payment type. So those of you who really don't track that and aren't aware of it, this can be eye-opening to you and can be a good conversation starter with your AP team and your AP and Treasury team if you're the CFO. Let's go ahead and take a quick look. All right, let's see. Majority by checks. I'm glad to see that number is 28%. That's pretty good. I think what we've seen, if I can recall from the data, we've seen for B2B, that number has gone below 50%, which, believe it or not, is a milestone. Glad to see that 43% of you are majority of electronic payments, 21% of you about equal, 8% don't know. Again, that's a homework. That's find that out. But really the question that I ask is, why are you writing checks? Dramatic pause, right? So that's a good question to ask. So go in and start to look. Why are you writing checks? Is it a requirement? Is it in the contract? And then what you'll see is you start to look at, so that would be my top level payments optimization goal would be, okay, metric, number of payments by check, percentage, electronic payments, and let's see how we drive that percentage up. What's our low-hanging fruit? I was at, I was at an AP conference in November of last year, talked to a few accounts payable managers who actually have worked with their procurement teams and written it into the contract that they need to accept electronic payments, or it's going to be pretty costly to them to do so. And surprisingly enough, she said there wasn't a lot of feedback. So there's a lot of opportunities to help you knock off that low-hanging fruit. Again, you can't use the same approach with every supplier, but you need to strategically look at optimizing that payments mix. So thank you very much, everyone. Just a few, some food for thought. Sending a paper check is 10 times more expensive than costing and receiving an ACH payment, and receiving a paper check is 5 times as expensive. So on their side, right, it costs me 10 times more to process it. Oh, it costs you 5 times more to receive it. So that's kind of a win-win. You look at a wire payment, again, this is a high dollar, low value. Maybe you need to be able to track it. Tell your supplier that you're really looking for it. $14, I think that might be a little low from my experience. Median. So if you're doing a P card, electronic card, so that you see that's $1.99, and I would say that's pretty comparable with that ACH payment. Depending on your volume, could be lower. And then just for the sake of information, the median rebates for annual card spend can be between 26 and 50 basis points. So, so that means, right, so what are we doing there, right? What's the opportunity there if we can convert those folks? So I had a few questions on float. Really, in today's world, there's just not a lot of float, right, to there, and there's no point in playing the float game anymore. So obviously that can be something you can consider, and how quickly the checks clear, but it's just not an important consideration in today's world. So let's talk a little bit more about your portfolio, because I think this is an area of opportunity for AP and Treasury. I think it'd be great for you to know your company's current portfolio of supplier payments by payment type, and then start to look at trends that you might already have going in the right or wrong direction in percentages by payment type. It'd be great to have goals relative to the mix of payment types to suppliers. again, you might want to group your suppliers in certain categories. You may have a little bit more of a struggle getting certain ones to convert, but you communicate. It may make sense for you to make changes in the payments types offered. Maybe you don't offer credit cards. Maybe you want something you want to look at. You can identify what's the opportunity there with our supplier base. And then I think it's good to have programs in place to convert suppliers to target payment types. You can do this internally. There's also a lot of the AP automation solution providers that are happy to help you in design those programs. And really a big focus for them is to help get them in these payment portals where they can be converted to these cards that offer rebate programs. So they work with you on the messaging. They share with you how to, I call it doing the payments dance with your suppliers. So this is something that can add a lot of value. And this is something that you can do right now as well. And just, for those of you who have a lot of check payments still, this is the reality of the marketplace right now. The risk of payments fraud is less with electronic payments. More and more companies prefer electronic payments. You'd probably be surprised if you ask your suppliers, do you have any hesitations with taking a check? I would imagine that the one you're going to get is remittance detail. And then you can say, oh, good. Well, by the way, I can give that to you. They'll be like, of course. And then they can also know when they're going to get that payment, right? You're not worried about you paying the float. I put the check out. It's going to take 1-2 days to get here. I know when it's getting here. Help some in their working capital optimization, right? And then again, technology can automate remittances. We can link remittance and payment data. And SaaS-based solutions, most of them, all of them, right, result in minimal overhead for the IT department. So just kind of on that line, just that, we need to be cognizant of the fraud risk that we have. So again, we look at payment fraud methods from the AFP Payments Fraud Control. 74% were targeted, 28% there, and then it shows the percentage. So we still see quite an incidence of fraud. So that's just something to keep in mind as we look at AP done right. We need to understand and mitigate those fraud risk. So what are the things? How does AP automation mitigate risk exposures? Right, it minimizes our manual task workflow. It can automate our controls. We talked about this. Prevent duplicate payments. Creates clear audit trails, and facilitates the use of less risky types. So those just, again, we're building up this value proposition here. Mitigates payment fraud exposures, mitigates the cost of making payments, right? So we talked about this. Let's optimize our payments mix. Automation allows us to take more control of how we make payments. And part of that is the visibility that we have, right? So let's look at those patterns of our suppliers and why they might be good candidates to move. Improves our working capital management, compliance, and controls. Extremely strong value propositions. So let's take that theory into practice. Few case studies, just a few quick words about my webinar partner. Just a leader in the space, have over 1,500 customers, millions of invoices captured. They have partnerships with Amex and integrations with Visa and MasterCard to help you optimize those payment types. And they have relationships across the industry, CPA firms, consultants, payment processors. So trying to really add value to the office of the CFO, a really valuable partner of mine because they have a strong commitment to thought leadership. So I'm technology agnostic, but I look for thought leadership, commitment to the industry, and really interaction with the clients and what they need, what their needs are. So just some quick case studies. So again, we have those of you who might be a little smaller company, different levels of complexity. So I'll try and hit on some case studies that'll really resonate with you in the situation that you have. So first case study, really quickly, there's a company, Quick Fire Restaurants. It's a management group in Texas. So they had big issues just on the document management side, and the amount of paper that was going back and forth was really causing problems. They were scanning invoices, putting them online in a Dropbox, and then waiting for approval from the CFO. So again, you can see all the problems in workflow there, inefficiencies, how long it took them. So what they were able to do, that cut the time in half. So what does that do for us, right? It allows us to take advantage of those discount opportunities that we might have, all these entities, the problems that we might have on the accounting side, journal entries, they integrated seamlessly with QuickBooks. So one good thing about a lot of these leading solutions is they integrate well with where you're at in terms of the complexity of your accounting system. So we'll go to QuickBooks. We'll go to, enterprise solutions such as NetSuite. So that's really good to know as well. And then what that shows you as well as that a great solution can grow with you when your company grows, right? So maybe your company is a hyper growth company. Well, the good news is, just for the sake of argument, example, Mineral Tree will work, right? You upgrade to NetSuite from QuickBooks. Guess what? Seamless. It's almost seamless, so it's good. So you don't have to go through that process again. And then the ROI, the solution paid for itself in just 1 year. And I know that is pretty common. Of course, you have to put the homework in up front. But if you start to look at all the components of that value proposition, just that invoice processing cost, right, that usually does it. But then we start to look at those productivity impacts. What about the payments? Taking control of those payments. Huge. So let's take a look at a little bit more complicated, maybe a lot more. 115 locations, 600 invoices each month. So the majority of you, I think 56%, had over 500. They had an approval issue. The CFO was on the goal. They still had a lot of manual data and entry and time spent in Excel. So they were going back and forth on formatting issues. So had some issues there with standardizing processes. So what they were able to do, multiple review and approval levels, got that control. And they had that, and they moved to an invoice capture, saves them 13 hours each month. So again, that time savings, that productivity, and then it really helps them on the control side. So the first one we saw, okay, invoice processing costs, manual entries. This case study for Express Locations, a premium retailer for T-Mobile USA, we saw concerns on the control side and that manual data entry. So you'll see it's usually a multi-layer value proposition. It's a win-win, right? Lower cost, improved productivity, but also better risk management as well. EverQuote, internet marketing firm. They had issues with making ACH payments, so they realized that they need to be more efficient in the way they were making their payments, take more control doing those electronic payments, and they were a fast-growing industries. So they were really able to streamline the processing of the invoice, and they were easily processing those via ACH or check. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the ability of the business flexibility of these resources, they were able to stay with the solution they selected when they upgraded from QuickBooks to NetSuite. So as their business became more complicated, they were able to keep that solution. Maybe the most complicated one, Hollywood Wax Museum. I've been there. Maybe you'll see a statue of me there someday. The problem, they had over 1,000 payments each month. They were using GP, and they tried another solution which wasn't working. Then they did the due diligence. They needed something that had business integrability, which is key to any solution. They had a quick implementation. There was automatic ACH capabilities, something you want to look at, multi-entity support, built-in fraud prevention, and better invoice data extraction, save time on that front. So as we see, multiple layers of that value proposition, right? Lower invoice cost, improving productivity, improving that risk management, and productivity side, just giving everyone in the process more time to do things that are value add. Closing thoughts in some specific areas. These are good to print. So invoice processing, let's look at the key areas of value, why AP now matters. What does that mean? What do you want to do? Eliminate manual processes. You want to electronic information exchange, remove asymmetries with suppliers, provide proactive support, maintain open lines of communication, establish visibility, take control of how you pay suppliers. Your AP automation solution should allow you to do all these things. Improvements in invoice processing, lowering that cost, dollar terms, time terms, supplier relationships. You want a solution, the onboarding process, make it seamless. You need to be able to educate your suppliers what you want to do on your relationship side, the benefits of electronic document exchange, payments, payment timing, You want to be able to communicate to them the value to them in terms of lower AR processing costs. You want to look at those supplier contracts. Again, minimize asymmetry of information, provide that support, and then this visibility. All these things improve your supplier relationships. What does that do? Gives you more control of how and when you make payments. And again, in closing, I apologize, we won't have time for our Q&A. I'll reach out with you directly with any questions that we did not get to today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question as I review those 10 ways that AP automation impacts the bottom line. We went over this slide earlier. So this is the value proposition. Why does it matter? Why does it matter now? Mitigates invoice processing costs, mitigates that time, resolving supplier issues, allows you to capture discounts, facilitates early payment programs, impacts your productivity, mitigates your payment processing costs, opportunities for rebates for commercial cards, improves working capital management, and it also improves the productivity of employees approving and effecting payments. There are so many components to the value proposition of AP automation. It's cost effective. And so when you look at the value proposition, it really resonates across the enterprise, regardless of the size company that you have. So I encourage everyone to take a deeper dive. If you're looking, be cognizant of all the information that I shared. What's that value proposition? What should it look like? What can you expect from your partner? What should you expect from your partner? So really big goal here is to help all companies of all sizes really realize AP done right, which means that AP is going to be a strategic partner, and absolutely the time is now for you to really invest in AP done right. I would once again like to thank our sponsor, Mineral Tree. We appreciate and share their commitment to thought leadership. They offer great resources, which you can review by visiting the Mineral Tree website. Finally, to our audience, thank you so much for your valuable time. We appreciate the support of each and every one of you. Make the rest of your day great, everyone.